Hey everyone, today I want to talk about CSS. We talked about HTML and a couple other things, but I never got to CSS. So today's the big day. Here are the topics. I've worked it out on this little HackMD document. CSS, first of all, what is it? Why might you need it or use it? Second of all, some fundamental concepts that if you don't have an understanding of these things, you will never be able to write usable CSS. And then I'll build on it a little bit with pulling in external CSS libraries. There's a lot of great libraries out there. Font Awesome is one of them. There's Google Web Fonts, fonts.google.com, and Glyphicons. There's a ton of different things, all for different uses and use cases. So I'll just talk about a couple of them. This is Font Awesome. By the way, it shows you, it gives you a way to embed really cool icons into your site for free, and lets you style them so you can have multiple sizes and things. Google Web Fonts is just a font library. Glyphicons gives you icons like Font Awesome, and Animate CSS is an animation library. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. I'll talk about grid systems like Bootstrap. Foundation has a grid system, and there are a couple just dedicated grid systems out there that help you do things like code for different screen sizes. I know that's a big concern amongst everyone. So yeah, responsive layouts with grid systems, it will be the next thing. And then CSS frameworks overall, so Bootstrap in its entirety, Foundation in its entirety, so on and so forth. But let's get started with what is CSS. So just from the very beginning, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it describes what your site will look like. So HTML, when you learned it before, it sort of is a way to capture your content, and you're able to show what your content is using HTML by using things like paragraph tags and body tags and divs and stuff to group and sort of shape your page. But then CSS allows you to hook into that HTML and set rules for what you want that page to look like. You can change things like font sizes, colors, background colors, paddings and margins and stuff like that. I'll also talk about the box model. This is actually an important thing. So first and foremost, instead of actually, I say here that I'm going to talk about linking to HTML, but instead I'm just going to use CodePen because it's a lot easier to get up and running with usable environment. So let's just do this for now. I'm going to create some dummy stuff that I can just use as a sample. So sample test, and then I'll just create a couple divs. I'm just going to pause it here so you can see the finished product. I'll be right back. Okay, so I just wrote some dummy HTML here on the left, and now I want to talk about just, first of all, the concept behind CSS. So here, if you look on the screen, there's this HTML box on the left and CSS on the right. The way this works, and the syntax will look very strange at first, CSS is kind of different from HTML and general programming languages. It's like a styling language, so it's styling, its syntax is very peculiar if you're new to it, but just bear with me, it shouldn't be too hard. So let's just focus on this bit. Let's look at this first div here on the left. It says there's a div, and if you don't know what you're looking at, go and study HTML first. There's a video on it, and then come back to this one. So this is just a div with a class of the word box. CSS uses these kinds of classes as well as IDs. So if I duplicate this and I make an ID and I call this, I don't know, box 2 or something, then CSS uses these as sort of hooks that you can reference in your CSS to style whatever goes on inside an HTML tag. You can also reference this directly, so if I wanted to set a rule for all divs instead of just divs with the class of box, then I can do that. And it's very granular. CSS, it's very it gives you a huge amount of control over how things look. So there's a lot to learn, but let's just dive right into it. So first and foremost, let's just examine this markup for a second so you know what you're working with. There's two divs, but they're empty. So there's div class of box, a div with an ID of box 2. They're both empty. And then there's a div with a class of first with an h1 tag in it that says hello. And then there's a second div with a class of second, and inside are just two paragraphs inside paragraph tags. And so that's really all you're looking at. I'm just going to get rid of these because on CodePen I don't think you need these tags at all. So there we go. It's a little cleaner. All right, great. Okay, so let me pull this back up so you can see the finished product here on the bottom. And so let's start just setting some rules. Okay, so let's say I want to target this box div here at the top. Then I guess the syntax for CSS uses periods and pound symbols. These are also called octothorpes or hashtags. But the pound symbol, this little symbol right here, to reference classes and IDs respectively. So let's say I want to target this div with a class of box. Then I can type box and then opening and closing curly brackets, and then I can type a bunch of stuff here that'll change the appearance of this. So even though this is empty, we can still style it a little bit. So let's give it a height of 150 pixels, a width of 150 pixels, and a background color. You'll notice at the bottom here it's already moving. There's an invisible div right here, but to see it, let's set a background color of maybe, is dark purple a color? No, let's just do purple. Okay, so now we can see that there's a div here in the HTML with a class of box. In the CSS on the right, we reference this class by using the dot, which is for classes, and then the name of the class. And then inside these brackets or these braces, we can set some rules. Let's keep going. Now let's say I want to style this second div with an ID of box2. So instead of a period this time, we'll use the pound symbol and type box2 because the pound symbol is for IDs. And then let's just copy and paste this in for now. And if it works, yeah, we'll see a second little div pop up here. Let's change the background color to green. So now we can tell. All right, so we have our box and box2, and we're using a class and an ID to style them. There's a lot of different things at this point that I can discuss, but let's just go one more. Let's do one more thing. Okay, so now I'm going to let's add a quick paragraph in both of these. So paragraph, and then I'll just say I like cats, and then paragraph 2, the second paragraph, and it says I like dogs. Okay, so now each of these has some text inside of it. What if I wanted to change the color of the text inside of the div? There are a couple ways to do this, and this is why CSS for a long time is considered like one of the most hated things to write. Like, a lot of developers hate writing CSS because there's so many ways to achieve the same thing. So I'll discuss some of the ways. So first of all, I can just do P to reference all paragraph tags. And if I do that, then if I write color to change the color to white, then yeah, the color on the left, the color on the bottom of these pieces of text will change to white. And that seems fine because, all right, with one tag, you manage to target both of these. But then the problem is, if you go down here, all this text now also turned white. So you can see what's, like, even at this point, what's difficult about CSS, right? It's the hard part about it isn't writing it. It's about writing it correctly so that you're not screwing yourself up later on in the process. If you were to write something like this, you immediately screwed yourself over because the text on the rest of the page now becomes invisible. So let's see how we might be able to fix that. We can use this secondary syntax. So I'm going to delete this for a second. We can use this secondary thing. It's a thing that CSS offers you and lets you do to target and scope your CSS rules so that they're more specific. And that word is important, specific. So let's say we want to target only the paragraph tags inside this box div, this div with a class of box. So in that case, then we can first target the box because it's sort of like the wrapper around the paragraph that we want to target. So we target that, and then we can type P and then set some rules. So if we do this now only the paragraph inside the first div is activated or targeted. And now if I change this to an ID, then box 2, right? Box 2, and now the second one is targeted. So by using this sort of like parent and child syntax, you can target children of parents, I guess I don't know if that's actually the correct terminology, so definitely double check, but you get what I mean, right? So this is a child HTML tag, and this is the parent that's wrapping around this child. So yeah, you can target things that way. There's another syntax that you can use. So if I want to do, let's say I want to target both, just this paragraph and this paragraph, but I want to do it with one CSS rule. I could do this. I could do box P and then do color white. And if I do this, then I've created one rule here and one rule here to target one of these boxes respectively. But I can also, if the rule that you're applying is going to be the same, I can also do box P and then a comma. And then a comma is just a way of saying that whatever is inside these curly braces should apply to this and this. Okay, so so far, let's just recap briefly. A period is used to reference classes. Hashtag symbol or a pound symbol is used, or an octothorpe is used to reference IDs. You can target both classes and IDs in your CSS, but you can also target divs. Let's say I wanted to, let's try that actually. So let's say I wanted to give all divs a border of 5 pixels. Let's make it 15 pixels, solid border and black border. So now with this, I targeted the HTML element directly instead of just the class or just the ID. So CSS is very versatile, it's very powerful, and it lets you do a lot of things, but earlier we touched upon this topic of specificity, right? If I go back and I just erase this last thing that we wrote to change the text color, and I do this again, we instantaneously had a problem because the text here was white, as we wanted in that case, but also the text here turned white. So how do you manage that? This question and this problem is solved by knowing how CSS's specificity works. So specificity is what it sounds like, and it's kind of complicated, so I won't go into it too deeply, but suffice it to say, the more specific a rule is, the higher priority it will be. So let's say, let's try this. Okay, so I have a general rule here for paragraphs in the entire page. So every single paragraph tag has white text, right? It's all white. So now let's say I want everything to be white, but if it's in box 2, let's say the second one here, I want this to be blue. So how would I do that? So all I have to do at this point is create a rule for box 2 that is more specific than this one. And so it can get tricky, but just let's keep going. This rule, if you look at here on the right side, this is a rule for all paragraph tags. And I just said all paragraph tags. So in the very intuitive sense, and by the intuitive definition of specificity, this is not very specific, right? It's very general. It's all paragraph tags. Let's get a little more specific. The other syntax that I used earlier, what I did, the pound symbol and box 2, and then P, this is more specific from the get-go because I'm not saying all paragraph tags. I'm saying paragraph tags that are within this parent HTML thing that I'm targeting, right? And I say thing because this doesn't have to be a div. This can be a span. So if I wanted to target span and I like birds, I can do that as well. If I typed, class, I don't know, something, I can target this span too. Right now, I only gave classes and IDs to divs, but a span can have a class, a paragraph can have a class, an image can have a class. Everything, I think, can have a class pretty much. So yeah, but anyways, let's keep going. So this rule right here is more specific because I'm saying I only want to target paragraph tags inside this box 2 element. So if I do this now, color, what did I say before? Blue. Let's just make it blue. Yeah, so now I set this general rule here. Let me erase this because this span is confusing things. So I said this general rule where I want all the paragraphs on the page to be white. So this first one is white, and these last paragraphs are white. But I made a more specific rule here to override this, right? I made it more specific, and so the browser, when it sees this piece of CSS, it's like, oh, well, this is more specific. So when I see this piece, you probably want this rule. You don't want this rule because it's more generic. And so this is just a small example, but there are a lot of things that affect specificity. So first and foremost, let's just get it out of the way. Class is less specific than IDs. So think about, if you just think about like a university or any club or anything, well, specifically a university, you can have a class of students, but each student has their own unique ID, right? So a class refers to a group of kids or a group of people, but an ID refers to exactly one. It is more specific. So from the get-go, if I use a class, so if I say, like, for example, if I change this to an ID of box, and I do, let's say I change this, so this rule no longer applies, so let's erase it because I changed the name from box 2 to box. Let's say, all right, so I have a rule here for the class box, and I have a rule for, let's see this. Okay, so now, so both of these divs now have a class of box, but this one also has an ID of box. So if I'm not mistaken, if I do this, and I change this from background color purple to background color green, yeah, so this, by default, the ID is more specific than the class. So even though this div is targeted by this rule here, this background purple, an ID is more specific, so this is the rule that gets chosen and that ultimately gets applied. And so classes are less specific than IDs. IDs are more specific than classes. So that's one of the things that affects specificity. The second one, as we noted earlier, is like nesting. I think that's a good way to put it. I'm not sure if that's the official term again, but nesting. So if I want to target a child of a parent, so let's say I want to target this paragraph tag inside of this one, and in my CSS, if I write something like box or box P, now this rule becomes more specific, but it's not because I used an ID, because this paragraph tag doesn't have an ID. It's because I said specifically that I want to target children of some other element. And I can keep going. So let's say if there's another div inside this div, cheese, I don't know, some silly thing, and I want to do this, I could just keep going with the nesting thing. I could do, there's this div with an ID of box, so I'm targeting that here, and inside that div, there's another div with an ID of cheese, and inside that div, there's a paragraph tag. And so if that's the case, then yeah, so it gets applied here. This rule right here changes the color of the text here. Yeah, so a couple things that you should take away from this little piece is that specificity and managing specificity is very, very important. I actually go so far as to say is that it's like the thing that defines a good CSS developer versus a bad one. So if you have a really strong grasp of specificity, you're set and you're good to go. You won't really be able to sit down and study it. This is the kind of thing that just comes from wrestling with CSS for a while and just working on projects. So just get in there and build something, and you'll soon find all the challenges behind it. But yeah, so specificity, There you go. There's a good primer for it. But moving on, is there anything else I want to say about specificity? Let's just read this real quick. Specificity is a weight that is applied to a given CSS declaration. Any rule that you write in CSS is referred to as a declaration. So this right here, all of these are all called CSS declarations. No. These. Yeah. So specificity is a weight that is applied to a given CSS declaration determined by the number of each selector type in the matching selector. When specificity is equal to any of the multiple declarations, the last declaration found in the CSS is applied to the element. Okay, so it's kind of like very academic, but this right here is, I guess, the more useful part. It tells you the different ways, the different things and how specific they are. There's this one thing, but I'm not going to talk about that because it encourages bad practices. All right, so let's move on from specificity now. So let's just cross this off. Bam. Why didn't that go away? All right, so specificity is out of the way. So are classes and IDs. Let's talk about the box model next. Let's wipe this, all except for the last one. So I'm going to wipe all my HTML and all my, except for this, and all my CSS. It's all clean. So we're starting again with a clean slate for the next topic, which is the box model. Okay, so now the box model is another sort of academic concept until you see it being used in practice. So let me see if I can find a good diagram of this. It's pretty straightforward, but an image helps. So let's just look for an image right here. Okay, right here. This one's a little prettier. All right, so here's the gist of the box model. It's when you're trying to position things on a page or control how things look on a page, very often you find yourself having to deal with this concept of padding, border, and margin. So let's look here. Briefly, I'm just going to write a quick rule here. Background color blue and color white. So just you could see the div. So this blue part that you're seeing is the entirety of this div right here. And notice this looks terrible. And if you're brand new to this, if you're brand new to web design, you might not be able to point out why. But let me just add a couple rules and it'll immediately become clear. First of all, let's make this a little shorter. Okay, so let me just do that. All right, now, so that's not so much related, but let me add a couple rules here. So let me add this, and let me make 2 of these, or 3. Let's add 3, so there's a couple now. Okay, so this looks weird, so let's add another rule. And instead of this, let's make this. All right, yeah, let's just do it like this. Okay, so this looks a little better. Granted, of course, I'm not trying to make a layout here, but there's something more aesthetically appealing about this versus this, right? This looks kind of terrible. The other one, this looks a little better. And so if you look at why, you'll notice it's because of the amount of spacing between stuff. Let's just keep it simple at that. And let me add one more rule. Border 5 pixels solid purple, and then here, yeah. Okay, so first of all, there's the content, right? Let's just use the terms that are in the actual box model. There's the content, which in this case, for our use case right here, it is this paragraph tag in the middle of each div. It is the text that says "I like cats." That is the content. Between the content and the surrounding container that it's in, which in this case is a div, but it just as well could be a span or something else, there is this amount of room. In the terms of the box model, the space between the content and its containing the borders of its container is known as padding. So if you look here, right, in our case, the text in the div that says I like cats is the content, and the space between that text and the div that it's in is referred to as padding. And then right on that line around the div itself, there's a border, which is what you normally would think a border is. It's just a thing that goes around the perimeter of the div. And then outside of the div, the space there is referred to as the margin. So inside space is referred to as padding, outside space is referred to as margin, and on the line is referred to as a border, which you can color or do whatever you want with. So let's look at what I wrote. Okay. Real quick, I'm going to set a rule that makes it a little easier to see them all in one line. All right, there you go. All right, so now padding. If I increase the padding, let's see what part changes. So right now it's 0 padding. If I add 1 rem, that equals 16 pixels. So let's just be explicit about it. 16 pixels. Maybe I could change it to 50 pixels. And then notice the space between the content and its container, its div, got bigger. Now let's change the border. Let's make it 20 pixels and make it blue. I know, not blue, green. All right. So now look, very straightforward, right? The border around the div turned green, and we can control it. There are other options here too. I think you can do dashed, which looks ugly, but maybe for some reason you really want to do this at the bottom. So if that's the case, you can. And now finally there's the margin. So if I do margin, and let me change this back to 16 pixels. If I change the margin, it controls the space outside of the container. So if I do this to maybe 40 pixels or whatever, yeah, so now it gets bigger. And I can just let's make this crazy big, 150 or 150. So yeah, now it's so big that it broke and it wrapped to the next line. And so there you go. Box model is pretty straightforward. We'll revisit that later when we talk about CSS grid frameworks, but right now the box model is not that hard, right? It's just CSS's understanding of how to position elements and how to show elements and how to space things out on the page. You have to know the box model. And luckily for us, the terms here, padding, border, and margin, directly correspond to the actual code things that you would write in the page. So padding, border, and margin. And then it's just a matter of tweaking to taste. So there you go with the box model. Bam, that's it. There's that. Bam, there's that. For structure, a lot of people have been asking, what is like my file project structure, or what are some commonly used like actual file structures? So like if you open up, let's go to my projects folder and make a new directory called video CSS, cd into that video folder, make it a little bigger, and then touch a new file, index.html, touch style.css, and then I'll open this folder in Sublime Text. So this right here, so how do I structure it? Do I have like a source folder, and then do I move these things? Let me open Finder now. Do I move these things into the source folder? Because some people do that. Or do I have something else entirely? I know some people have like a dist folder, and then there's so many different file structures out there that this is a very common thing. But for right now, I'm just going to recommend this. Either, if you're learning CSS, you should just use CodePen for now, because there's so much to learn before you get into like the file structure aspect of it, that honestly learning file structure at the start is kind of a waste, because eventually later on you're not even going to use the stuff you learned, and your file structure is ultimately going to depend on the tool you end up using, probably. So that's kind of a moot thing to learn, a moot point. Wouldn't focus on that right now. Just use CSS on CodePen to get it started up and running. And then later when we come to Sass, that's when I'll talk about things like file structure, Webpack, I don't know, build tools, grunt and gulp, and all that good stuff. So if you're just sitting to learn or hear about file structures, then I'm sorry, I think I'll have to put that off. I will talk about it at the very end just to hold you over, but not right now. So in the meantime, let's skip over that and go into pulling in external CSS libraries. So in my HTML file, that my junk one that I just made here, let me just open this, create a skeleton, and I'll make this a little bigger. Let's just say CSS video, HTML, whatever. And then I'll just do some random junk text again. Okay, this is too big. But yeah, so let's just do this. And then let's pull stuff in. I'm going to open this actually in Chrome. So if I open source index, it should open in Chrome. Great. All right. So now I can see the file that I'm working on here in Chrome itself. Let me clean this up a little. Actually, that's not going to be useful even if we have it. So div class main, let's just call it that, and then indent this, create a paragraph with a class of main paragraph, something like that, and then just add some dummy text. Bam. Okay. I'll talk about what I'm doing here, like the thing where I can do this. That's a Sublime text feature, so that's something else, but focus on the markup. Sorry, I'm like getting distracted. All right, so pulling in CSS libraries. Let's just go one by one and just start pulling stuff in. First and foremost, I will use Google Web Fonts. This is a very popular library and service that you can use to have access to all of these really cool fonts. And in fact, there's a paragraph tag here, but let's create an h1 tag. Oh god, h1 with a class of main heading. And then I'll say, this is the heading. Actually, let's do something fun. I love capybara. Okay. So now if we go here and refresh the page, bam. All right, so now let's say I hate this font and I hate this font and I want to change them both. Let's start working on that. And in fact, let me hook the HTML to the CSS up for those who do want to see how it's done. This is the syntax for it. So you open up a link tag in HTML. The rel, which I don't even know what this stands for, but just copy this. Rel equals style sheet, type equals text slash CSS. And then here, I'm just going to write the name of this file here. Since they're in the same folder, so index.html and style.css are in the same source folder, so all I have to do is type style.css. If it was in some other crazy folder, you would have to do some like crazy like this kind of a thing, but it's not, thankfully for us, so this should work now. So let's just test it out. I'll target, if I look here, I don't like how this is spreading across the entire page. I kind of want to just look at one page, like this one section in the middle. So let's try to do some standard setting up code for that. Yeah, let's say that the width of this div is 600 pixels. The height, or the minimum height, is 700 pixels. It's not going to matter. Let's add some padding just so it looks good. Let's center the text align center, and background color, let's make it fun, color white. Okay, let's see what this looks like. All right, so this looks terrible. Maybe let's make this 4. Okay, and then now if you set a width and you'd use margin auto, this is a little trick, then these two commands together will allow you to center something. Take that with a bit of caution, what I just said, because it's not always going to work and sometimes it'll mess up your layout hugely, but for simple use cases, width plus margin auto will make your thing go into the center. I'm going to write a margin top as well to just get it to the actual center of the page. All right, so that looks good. Please note that CSS files are evaluated from top to bottom, so I set this rule here, margin auto, and effectively that's the same as saying this, margin top auto, margin bottom auto, margin left auto, and margin right auto. So margin auto is the same as writing these 4 things out, but if I do this, like let's say I did margin top auto and then margin top 2 rems, this is second in the page, like this is after the first rule, so this will be the one that sticks. So just know that. I'm going to reset this to margin auto and then save it, and then it should work. All right, so it's getting centered, and then the second rule here is overriding this one for the top margin, and so that's why we get this here. Right, so let me make this a little 4. All right, so now it's a little cleaner. Still looks like crap, but looks a little cleaner. So yeah, now let's work with this. So we have some stupid boilerplate CSS set up, and now let's say that we want to pull in some CSS libraries starting with Google Web Fonts. Because the choice of the font doesn't actually matter, I'm going to just choose one randomly. There's a great couple of options on the page itself. So if you go to fonts.google.com and look on the top right, there are categories: serif, sans serif, display, handwriting, and monospace. Serif refers to fonts that look like Times New Roman. It has the little tail. So if you look at this blue, letter blue, there's a little tail at the top, right? And at the end of the bottom of some letters, there's those little tails that like come out. That's all serif really means. For example, like on this T, if you notice there's that little down part that comes out. If I click sans serif, it is what it sounds like, just without serif. And then you'll notice there isn't the same thing. So there's like, if you look at M, there's no like flourishes to the M, whereas if I look at it on serif, there probably will be. Let's find an M. Yeah, my. So there's these little tails. I'm just going to use sans serif because they're more popular in general. Let's go with thickness. I want a thicker one because I'm looking for a heading font to start. All right, so this Roboto one looks really good. And in fact, this is actually really popular. So all I have to do is click it, and then this little pop-up will come up. Oop. Click it. All right, well, it already happened for me, actually. So if you click the plus symbol, this little thing at the bottom here, this one family selected thing will pop up, and then it'll give you basically what you need to do. It says to embed your selected fonts onto a web page, copy this code into the head tag of your HTML document. So let's just go ahead and do that. Copy and paste this, go back to my text editor. This is my head tag right here. Let me center it or focus it. So this is my head tag. I'm just going to copy and paste the thing from Google. All right, simple. And then now it says specify in CSS. So now, now this HTML page is able to see the font, basically. But now I have to actually apply it to this heading, because right now, even though I imported it, I'm not using it because I didn't say that I want this to be Roboto. So now I have to actually set that. So font family equals Roboto. And let's just paste it in for now, actually. Let's set a new rule because I want to target this H1 with a class of main heading. So let's do that. And you can also do this, H1. This is more specific than this. But generally, it's just easier to just use the class, so try to get used to that. So we create a new HTML, a new CSS declaration to target this, and then I'll copy and paste in the snippet from Google Web Fonts. And now if I refresh the page, hopefully it will work. Yeah, so the font changed. Let me just disable this real quick so you can see that it indeed worked. Yeah, so let me re-enable that and refresh again, and great. Okay, so the font is being loaded. Let's just do that again for our paragraph font. So now that we have the heading styled, I want to style this part. Let's choose something. This one looks okay. I'm just choosing one randomly. All right. Now, here's the thing with more than one selector. Previously, on this heading tag, we copied and pasted this part right here. And you'll notice if you look at it, it says fonts.googleapis.com, and then the name of the font that we wanted was Roboto with 900 font weight, which is just how thick it is. If you're importing multiple fonts from Google, you can actually, Google will actually keep track of the ones you want, and then create like a shortened one, so you can copy and paste just one instead of two. So if you look at the second tag that I copied and pasted, it has both Poppins and Roboto. So I could just delete this first tag entirely, and then the second tag that I pasted should take care of it for us. So now I can go in here, and I don't want to use Roboto, but I do want to use Poppins. So let's create a third one called main, what did I call it? Paragraph. Paste that in. and save. And then if I go back, hopefully, yeah, the font changed. So that's great. So we successfully pulled in one external CSS library, or I wouldn't call this a library, but it is a CSS import. So let's just call it a CSS import. So we used Google Web Fonts to style the font. Now let's look back at our itinerary. So there's Google Web Fonts. There's also Typekit, which is just the paid version of Google Web Fonts. You get a lot more fonts. You get more fancy fonts, and you get like designer exclusive fonts and things like that. So I guess things like this, which are a little fancier, you get access to all of these, but it is a paid service, so I won't go into that. It is more complicated as well, so if you want to look into it, they do have like learning materials and documentation for that. So good luck, handle it yourself, because I can't. Yeah, feel free to ask me questions. Font Awesome is next. Font Awesome is really, really amazing, and it kind of changed like the way people perceive their own user interfaces. It's a icon font. So in the same, like if you remember Webdings or Wingdings, it's like a font where each character is an icon, right? But Wingdings looks kind of trashy. It looks old and dated, and it looks kind of junky, and it's not optimized for the web or anything like that. So Font Awesome came along, and they're really awesome. You can go to fontawesome.io/icons, and then you can see all the icons that they let you use for free. They do have like pre-order and get exclusive fonts and stuff like that. So if you do want to support these people, I highly recommend looking into this, but not yet. So let's just focus on the basics for now. There's a number of really, really awesome fonts here. So let's just pull one and integrate it. I'll look for a fun one so that it's a little iconic. What's like a fun... These are meant to be used mostly in UIs, like actual web applications. So some of them are, very serious, like businessy ones, like, just like folders. That's kind of not fun. But there are silly ones here as well. Not quite as silly as like emoji, but yeah, there's this shower icon. So let's pull this in. Let's say we want to use this icon. Okay. So how do you do this? I actually don't remember. So let's just go through it from the beginning together. Let me go to this Font Awesome Get Started page, and it looks like they offer a CDN. Okay. I don't want to do this. Let's see. Do they have Font Awesome CDN just publicly available? Let me just Google this. All right, so it looks like this is available here. So let me just copy and paste this. I actually do kind of remember now. And then in the same way that we link to our style sheet with the link tag in HTML, and the same way that we linked to Google's own fonts using this link href or href tag, I can do the same thing, I believe, by pulling this in. Can I do this? Yeah. So click to copy, and I just paste this in. And so now it's doing the same thing. It's just pulling something else in. The link HTML tag is the thing that pulls in external CSS libraries, whether it's from your own file system, so whether it's this file right here on the right, style.css, or whether it's coming from somewhere on the internet. So in that case, you would use this href thing. And notice this href attribute is the same thing that is in the anchor tag, which is used for links. So that's a little interesting. So anyways, so we pulled it in. So now our HTML page can quote unquote see the Font Awesome library. So now all that is left to do is actually use it. So let's try and use it. Is it this simple? So after you get up and running, you can place Font Awesome icons just about anywhere with the I tag. Normally, if you've learned HTML from something like W3 schools, I will usually be referred to. It'll be the thing that you use to italicize things, but it's kind of outdated. So if you're trying to italicize things in your HTML nowadays, just don't use the I tags at all. Use CSS to style it. But yeah, let's not get into that. For right now, the I tag is kind of being repurposed for icons. So I class, and then there's Font Awesome's CSS classes that they have, and then aria hidden equals true is something that you include for accessibility reasons. So users who need to use screen readers because they can't see, this hides it so that when the screen reader is reading the web page, it just ignores this entirely because they don't need to know the icon type, right? So yeah, so let's copy and paste this into just like right here into our heading maybe. Let's see what that looks like. Let's see if it even works. Did I close my where is it? All right, let's just open it again. All right, so yay, it worked. All right, so here's the heading, and inside you can see that the icon popped up right here. Just real quick, because Font Awesome is something that I think people are interested in. There's more than just pulling it in. Say I wanted to make it bigger or smaller. They have ways of doing that. So right now, if we observe the thing I just pasted, I'll just focus on it. It says, so it's an I tag with a class of FA, which stands for Font Awesome, and then FA shower. But if I add these sizing classes, so like FA large or FA 5x, into this little tag right here, and I save it and I go into my browser and refresh the page, it is now presumably 5 times bigger. So there's a lot of like cool things that you can do with these icons. There's animated icons and stuff. So go to Font Awesome if you want to look deeper on that. Okay, so let's keep on moving. Glyphicons I'll actually skip, but I will talk about it a little bit. Glyphicons, I believe, came before Font Awesome, I think, and they're very similar. They offer their own set, and it's kind of a different look, but yeah, it's kind of an alternative. So definitely look through both of the libraries and see which icon set you like the most. They offer free versions as well, but you can pay again for like exclusive versions and special formats, special sizes, and stuff like that. So Glyphicons is just another icon font library. What else is left? Oh, animate.css. This is a fun one. So animate CSS. Animate. Yeah, oops, I wrote anime. All right, so this is like a very, very well-known library. And it's not so well used at like enterprise levels, you know, in like production ready, super sophisticated large code bases or websites. You don't typically find these because in those cases the developers kind of hand code optimized versions of CSS animations. But for our use case, this is amazing. So if we want to use this, it looks like there's 2 ways. You could just download it, or you can use the CDN. I'll try it both ways because I think it's important to know both ways. So if I just Google animate CSS CDN, usually I'll find something helpful. So let's just try this first link. And it looks like right here, I can just use this right here. So if you ever see min in the name, it just means it's the smaller compressed version, but it's the same library. So always go for the min version when you're trying to code something, because there's really no point in not doing that. And let's do the CDN approach first. So I copied and pasted it just like the other ones. And now, as far as using it goes, let's try to use it. So how do I use it? Let's see. I want to make, let's just say that I want to make this text fade in or something. So let's do that. If we go here and then open this drop down thing, there's fading entrances. There's fading exits, sliding entrances, a lot of different snazzy things. But let's just say I want to do a fade in down. So it'll do that effect. So how do I do that? If I click animate it, you can see how it's done. But if I want to actually use it, then you have to go, I think, to GitHub actually. And then you can see how it is done. Let's see. Wait, where are the docs? Wait a second. Oh, it's here. Okay, yeah. So, sorry. So you can install it, blah, blah, blah. And then here's the usage. So we added in the link to pull in the CSS. And then all you have to do is, right here, add the class animated to the element you want to animate. So let's do that. I want to animate this heading this H1. So there's the heading, main heading, but then I want to animate it, so let's add animated to that. And then you may also want to include the class infinite for an infinite loop. Let's omit that for now. And then finally, you need to add one of the following classes. So what did I want? I wanted fade in down, right? So let's just copy this, paste it in, save it, refresh the page, and let's see if it works. All right, so it works, and the shower icon went with it. Let me just try adding the infinite tag or infinite class to see how that changes it. All right, so now it's on an infinite loop. So that's pretty cool. Using these like fundamental CSS libraries, you can now control the font and like the typography of your website. You can include like these little icons that are really awesome through typekit through font awesome or glyphicons. And now you can animate things in a pretty simple, pretty restricted, but really easy to use way using animate.css. Let's get rid of this actually, the CDN. If I eliminate it and refresh the page, it should not work. Yeah, okay. And let's pull it in manually, just so you understand what's happening when CSS libraries are being pulled in via this link thing. So if I download it, it'll just download to my computer, and I'll show it in the Finder, and then it's just right here, right? So I'll copy this, and then let me go into my project folder that I've been using for this demonstration, video CSS. And then in my source folder, I'll just drop it in to here, right? And now, before, in the same way that we pulled in this style sheet on the right, now I could just pull in the style sheet for animate.css. So let's look at the name. It was called animate.css, so animate.css. And if all goes well, it should work. So it's the same thing, really. So if you're doing href animate.css or href style.css, you're pulling it in just from the local directory that it's in. But if you include href and then this URL, then it'll just pull it in over HTTP, just like it would pull in a regular web page or something like that. Okay, so I've been talking for a long time again, but I think this is a really important topic to get into. And I know like I glossed over so many things. Like I glossed over width. There's a lot of properties that you can go into, but yeah, I think this is a good primer, and the intent of this video is just to get you started and to make the topic of CSS seem a little less intimidating. So with that said, I could keep on going with grid systems and CSS frameworks. In fact, let's do that because, might as well. Here's a question for you now. So let's say I'm on this page and I have this page, and let's say I want to do a second div, and I want to call it secondary. So we have our main div here, but let's say I want to make a secondary div, and inside I'll just do an H2 that says secondary and a paragraph with some filler text again. Bam. So if I refresh the page, let me open this yet again. If I refresh the page, yeah, so it shows up here at the bottom. Now let's say that I want to style this. I want to create a layout. So in the last video I went over wireframing, and I discussed how sometimes you want to make things go on the left and the right in like a 6x6 kind of way, and sometimes you want a section to go the entire width of the page, and sometimes there's a lot of like configurations that you would want. So if I go to like Reddit, for example, just any Reddit page, if you just glance at this and look at it in a very generic way, this section here takes up I don't know, I'm terrible with this, like 20% of the page, maybe a fifth, and then the rest this is the 80%, right? So how do you do that? How do you control it so that you can achieve this kind of grid layout easily? There's two ways. Well, there's a lot of ways actually, so I shouldn't say that, but there's multiple ways you can do this. I'm going to erase all the code that I wrote so far and then just generically write some more CSS to get us restarted from a fresh start again. So for this main div right here, I have, let's just say the width is 80% of the screen, and the color, I do need to be able to see it for, demonstrative purposes. So let's just do that, and let's give it a height of, I don't know, 50 pixels, and let's see what that looks like. All right, so, I should get rid of these classes. I'm going to get rid of the icon and unfortunately get rid of the headings. I mean, the other classes. All right, so now this looks ugly as expected. Let's say min height again. All right, so now we have one div here. And now let's say I want to do a secondary div where I do width equals 20% and min height equals 50 pixels, and then the background color is green. Bam. Okay, so already we're noticing that, wait a second, I wanted this to be here, right? I wanted it to copy the Reddit's style where it's 80% and then 20%. But it's not doing that. So how do we control that? So there are very, very bad ways to do this. So let's kind of do it like a naive way. I can make it so that the display of these divs are inline, and then see, automatically just breaks it. So let's not do that, and let's just go right into the grid frameworks. That was stupid. All right, so grid frameworks are tools that you can use to quickly scale up a layout. So a popular one is Bootstrap, but Bootstrap comes with a lot of other stuff. If you look at maybe the CSS, so if you look at the CSS and go to this section, getbootstrap.com/CSS #grid, then it talks to you about Bootstrap's grid system. Foundation has one as well. So let's just look at that real quick. Foundation grid right here. So Foundation has a grid system as well, and there are tons of different grid systems. If I just Google grid systems CSS, let me just Google top CSS grid systems and then top 21. So this is just a list of 21 grid systems that are out there. And so really, I don't want to get into like all of these, because by and large, you're only ever going to need to know like 3 tops in your developer life for the next like 4 years. So don't worry about it too much. I'm just going to use the one I know, which is actually found. Bootstrap is a little more popular, so I'll just use Bootstrap. First of all, we need to pull it in, and then I can demonstrate how to use it. So I'm going to get rid of all these other things, and I'll need to pull in Bootstrap. Let's pull in Bootstrap via a CDN because it's faster. Just randomly Google it, find a CDN link somewhere. We want the min version. Do they have the link version of this? Yes, okay. Bam. So now this works. Now my HTML page sees Bootstrap, okay? And now let's go to the documentation and review the grid system. Where's the grid system? Okay, so it says Bootstrap includes a responsive, mobile-first, fluid grid system that appropriately scales up to 12 columns as the device or viewport size increases. It includes predefined classes for easy layout options as well as powerful mix-ins, so ignore this part. But it includes predefined classes. That's the important part. Let's look at the rules for these. And some people will say that, Bootstrap sucks, Foundation sucks, this other grid system sucks. Try not to listen to those people too much and try to form your own opinion. But the reason why they say things like that is because Bootstrap's way of achieving a grid system can make your HTML look kind of messy. So if you look here, let's see. Let's look at the rules. It says grid systems are used for creating page layouts through a series of rows and columns that house your content. Here's how the Bootstrap grid system works. Rows must be placed within a container or a container fluid for proper alignment and padding. So let's do that. This is let's see, inside my body tags, right, there's 2 divs, the secondary div and the main div. Let's call this, no, let's just keep it. But we have to wrap this now in a div called container. So I got to wrap it. All right, so now we're starting to bootstrapify our website, right? Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so now both of my divs are inside a container div. Done. Okay. Use rows to create horizontal groups of columns. Okay. Content should be placed within columns, and only columns may be the immediate children of rows. All right, let's just keep going. Predefined grid classes like row and column extra small 4 are available for quickly making grid layouts. All right, great. So let's try that. Within a container, we need a row, it looks like. And within a row, so let's wrap everything here in another div because we want to use rows, and we want both of these divs to be on the same row. If you recall, we wanted to do the 80-20 layout split thing. So let's try to achieve that here. Let's just isolate this. Okay. So now all of my stuff is inside of a container, which is now also which contains a row. Right. Okay. So now let's keep going. Column extra small 4. Okay. So let's look at what that means. If you look down here, there's grid options chart or table, and it'll tell you the prefix that you need to use in order to target different screen sizes. So if I want to say make this, all right, so right now let's say we're doing desktop only. Okay, great. So I want to wrap, this is getting confusing already, but all right, so I want to wrap my content in not only a row and a column, but also a column extra, no, we want to do desktop, so large, and then the number that comes after it, so column extra small 4, is the number out of 12 that you want. So it's starting to get a little convoluted, but all right, so here's the gist, right? So there are 12 columns. I'm just gonna keep on going. So let me see if there's a demo here somewhere. Great, right here. So every layout is split into 12 columns, and they chose the number 12 because it's a very versatile number and it's an even number. So you can have 12 columns of 1. You can have an 8 and a column 4, which collectively 8 and 4 equals 12. But 4 is, this 8-4 thing lets you achieve the sort of 80-20% split that you wanted earlier, right? But you could also do it 4-4-4. You could do it 6-6. So 12 just is the number they chose just because of how many multiples it has. Don't think too much of it. This second one here is kind of the one we want. So let's copy and paste that. Bam. All right, so now this is one column, and let's copy and paste this again. And then the second one here was 4, so let's do that, and then close it again. And then I'm going to use my auto indenter to make this cleaner to look at. All right, great. And so let's see if this worked. All right, so it did, but I had some rules here that are messing things up. So let me wipe my CSS. The width part of it, and go back. All right, so now it looks like we achieved it, right? And I want to just, for demonstrative purposes again, let's copy and paste this and make another row. And let's copy and paste this again and just make another row. Refresh the page and look, right there. This is the power of grid frameworks and grid systems. They allow you to use just a couple classes, and it's messy because you needed the container, the row, the column MD4, column MD8. It is kind of messy, yes, but look at how little CSS I had to write on the right side to achieve what is essentially a somewhat responsive layout. So now look, if I have this, it automatically becomes responsive, and that's an extremely powerful thing to be able to do this quickly. Yeah, but now let's say something else. So right here, if we go here, this is about the tablet. So this is the desktop size. This is about a tablet, and this is mobile, right? Let's say for tablet, I still want it to have the 80-20 split. Let's say that's just something I might want to do. In that case, I can do column SM8, and same thing here, column SM4. And if I refresh the page, oh, am I still? Oh, it's not working. Is it XS? Maybe it's XS. XS8 and then XS. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so now on the other ones where I decided that I want it to be 8 and 4, I didn't designate that I wanted them to be any different on a smaller screen size. They just have the one column MD8 rule. And so they kind of just defaulted to, all right, well, on a smaller screen size, maybe you just want to go full screen and just go full width like this. But on the last set of items, I did explicitly say, well, I want this layout to stay that way on small screen sizes too. And so in that case, it retained it. And so by using these different classes, these, this XS, SM, SM was valid. I guess I just messed up. MD and LG, you can control the layout and how it adapts at every single screen size. Okay, so there's that. That's grid systems. And this video is probably already over an hour, right? Oh my god, it's an hour and 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm just going to end it there. But everything that was covered today was CSS, right? It was CSS based. And think about the amount of things that we covered. Granted, there were some optional JavaScript stuff that you could have added in there for fancy effects and stuff. But if you recall, the fonts that we used with Google Web Fonts, the CSS grid system that we're using here, these are things that are all built in CSS only, pretty much, for the most part, by and large, right? And so hopefully that illustrates the power of CSS and how powerful it can be and how versatile it is. And if you have a really good grasp of CSS, you can build really phenomenal things. Like Facebook, I know Facebook is the example I kind of go to. Actually, this has private information, sorry. Reddit, actually Reddit's not very impressive, but YouTube, let's open YouTube in a new tab. So YouTube is built, yes, with, JavaScript as well, obviously, but the styling of the things on the page are all done with CSS. You could build really amazing user interfaces just with YouTube. I believe Atom as well, the text editor for the group, is also using CSS to style everything that you see. So when I launch this, come on, launch Atom. Slow. Okay, yeah, so when I launch this and I open up everything, the green up here, the little white border bottom thing that you see here, the fact that this icon changes when I hover over it, that's all CSS. And it's being used inside Atom. So hopefully this was a good introduction as well as an intermediate, sort of primer to get you not only introduced to the topic, but interested and up and running with maybe a prototype of some kind. And yeah, there's still so much more. There is Sass, which I didn't even talk about today, but that is Sass's life. And there's Flexbox, which is also life, because it allows you to very easily control vertical positioning as well. So if I go out here and if I delete the bootstrap, and let's say, let's just delete everything. So if I go here, come on, work. All right, so if I do this and I close the body and I close the HTML, I reformat it, and then I go to the body and I create some div, and I create h1 and hello, this is a test. So if I do this and I go here again and I target the div, and I say display equals flex, justify content equals center, and align items equals center. You don't have to memorize this. And height 400 pixels. And I refresh the page. Notice how, let me make BGC purple and color white. So notice how this is centered in the center of this div. And if I go here or here, it stays in the middle. This is actually really hard to achieve. Well, not hard, but very exhaustive to achieve without Flexbox. These three are Flexbox properties, but Flexbox is another thing. And, there's just so many cool things that people have done with CSS. And I'm not even getting into the animation. It's a big world, you guys. So, again, I hope this was a good introduction, and I'll try to make another one in the future for, going into more detail. But please let me know what you thought of this, what technologies you want me to discuss specifically, and etc. So if that's all you wanted from this video, please tune out now. For those of you who want to remain, I will talk now about the file structure that I use in my own projects, and the tools I use and the technologies I use to manage my CSS and my Sass. Yeah, so for those of you who aren't interested in that, please tune out now. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again in the next one. For everyone else, let's keep going. It's been a long day. This is now a long video, but I hope you just kind of return to it like you did with the wireframing one. All right, let's keep going. Let's discuss this now. I'm going to pull up a project that I did for my company, for my workplace. It's a website that was built in Hugo. So if you go to gohugo.io, this is a static site generator. I won't talk about this right now, but suffice to say, this is a way to build sites, and I built a site in it. Bam, that's it. And I want to talk about the structure that I used here. I actually really like this structure because I think it's extremely versatile, and I actually have not had any problems with it at all. So if you look here on the left, right here, there's a folder that contains my Sass code, and inside there are multiple other folders called atoms, components, init, modules, pages, templates, and utilities, and then styles. This is going to be a long haul, so if you want to watch this, get settled in. All right, so I'm going to pull up the site that is built in it. Right here. Okay, so this is the site that was built in Hugo. It's a reference site. It's pretty simple, standard. It just tells you, it's like an API reference kind of website. And I want to discuss how my file structure right here lends itself to this layout. Okay, so let's just go through it one by one. At the very beginning, first and foremost, this file structure is informed by Brad Frost's atomic design philosophy. So if I Google this and I go to some website, I hope that I'm going to the right site. Let's do this. Come on. All right, so atomic design, read now. No, this one. Come on. All right, yeah, so atomic design is this. It's based on the idea that every layout is built at its core, at its lowest level, it's built from atoms. So how might this apply in real life? So we have atoms. Those atoms, when combined, become molecules with certain properties and certain behaviors. When you group a lot of molecules, you get organisms with certain properties and certain behaviors. And then this is where the analogy breaks from real life, but we can keep on going in the digital world, right? There's no such thing as like a super mecha bioorganism. There's nothing like I can't fuse with 5 other humans to become like a superhuman or anything like that. But so the metaphor kind of breaks down, but in the digital world, we can keep on going to templates and pages, sort of, right? And so let's discuss this now in the digital world. If I go here, there are certain low-level considerations, what you might call atoms, with a website. So let's say the color of this, or the font family of this, or the color of this link, right? If I go to, let's say, some other thing, let's go to Font Awesome's website again, because I think that's just a pretty website to look at. So here, there's a lot of design decisions that need to be made when designing a site like this. What font is this? What color is the font? What color is this background? Like, where are these logos? What are the rules, the CSS rules governing images in our site? These are like low-level considerations that you don't want to code every single time you build a page, right? So like if you are building the home page, and then the about page, and then some other page, and some other page, and so on and so forth, if you have like 40 pages, you don't want to keep on coding the same rule. You don't want to always say that paragraphs are going to be black, right? That's very redundant, and that's very annoying. So what do? You set atoms that set kind of site-wide low-level properties, low-level considerations. So let's open up this atoms folder and kind of look at the stuff that's inside. There's a button class, a list class, a table class, and an image class. Some of these, don't look too closely at this code itself, but get an idea for what an atom might be. A button is kind of like a link, right? It's just a low-level kind of UI element. You click it, that's kind of it. There's really no other interaction. It's a very one-dimensional UI component. That's it. So you might include that in the atoms folder. So what's above that? In my own example, they use the term atoms, molecules, and organisms, but just because of the other coworkers and because to my own self I'm used to different terminologies, I substituted the term molecule for the word component, and I substituted the word organism for the word module. So instead of molecules and organisms, there are components and modules. So if we look here, there's this component folder and the module folder. If I look in the component folder, you can look at, let's see, actually, I don't think I actually use this folder. Yeah, this folder is empty, but I probably should have. So just let's look at that. Here on this section, it says get started with new lab. This is some sort of header. And then there's 3 sections, 3 purple blocks, right? Each block consists of certain quote-unquote atoms. There's a heading, which is a low-level, just simplistic, H1 or H2 tag. There's 2 paragraph tags here, and then it's just a list. That's really it. So this, you might say, is a component because it's not too complicated. It's not too fancy. There's not a lot going on, and it is primarily built from atoms, right? So maybe that's a component. You can keep on going further, but let's look at this thing at the bottom now. This footer at the very bottom has links. It has icons and just more links. But if you look at the markup for it, it's 3 lists. Sorry, 3 lists, and it's responsive, right? Oh, I actually have to fix that. That's not centered. And let's look at the top as well. If you go to this header and you look at the header, there's a logo and this language switcher thing. And if you close it, it's responsive as well. And this is particularly noticeable on the new lab, like the actual company website. And I only use these websites because I'm familiar with them. But yeah, so if you go here, there's this logo, the language switcher, a couple links. And if you shrink the page down, there's a hamburger button. And so it's still simple because it's just some text, but there's behavior to it now, right? There's like this responsive component where at a certain height, the hamburger button appears and you can click it, and then there's this like drop down that happens. And so there's like sort of an interactive, like a higher level interactive component to this piece, this header on the new lab site. And so if that's the case, that might be a module because it's not built from atoms. This is a logo, which might be an atom, and this might be a language switcher, which might be a component. So, and this itself, this little list right here, might be a component because it's not an atom. An atom would be like 1 link or 2 links, but a component is a series of links that serve some sort of purpose and has some extraneous functionality like this. Not extraneous, just extra. And so if that's the case, this thing at the top is a module. And so I use atoms, components, and modules to describe this difference in complexity, in interactivity, in like concerns, right? A low-level button doesn't need to respond particularly to anything except maybe a hover event. But a module, like a header, needs to be responsive. It needs to be aware of the viewport size, and it needs to respond certain ways. It needs to have hover states. It might have like, site-wide controls like this language switcher, where if I click JP, it'll switch to the Japanese version of the site. And so that's a little bit more complicated, and so that qualifies as a module. And then you can go even further and notice that we're sort of getting bigger and bigger, right? So if one link on this page is a atom, and a series of links might be a component, and a series of links along with a logo and a language switcher, collectively maybe that's a module. And now we can abstract it one more step and say, well, I'm gonna switch back to English because I can't read Japanese. Well, maybe let's look at the solutions pages. I don't mean to plug this, sorry. I do love New Lab and I think their technology is awesome. I don't mean to plug them right now, but this is this code base I know the most intimately, so I'm using this one. But yeah, so right here we have a hero component at the top, these 3 little feature paragraphs, and then like this section here. And if we go to the next solution, it's a very similar layout. There's the hero, 3 blurbs, and a bottom blurb with a case study. We can go here as well, and then just the same kind of layout, right? And a layout is even bigger than a module. It's like it describes the idea of a page, and it describes a series of pages. And so in this way, you sort of have building blocks, right? Atoms lead to components. Atoms and components can build into modules, and modules can build into templates. And so the last one on this atomic design snippet is pages. And pages is really just a specific instance of a template or a standalone template. So if I go to maybe like this contact page, there's not a bunch of pages that look like this page. So maybe then we include the code for the contact page in this pages folder. So pages contact or something like that. And so that's the gist of my file structure. And I use this master style sheet that uses Sass to import everything else from every other folder. So it'll do import everything inside the atoms folder, the components folder, the modules folder, templates, and the pages, right? Note that there's other folders as well, this init folder and this utilities folder. Init is just filled with stuff that needs to be initialized or included before everything else. So let's say in atoms, let's go to atoms and maybe the buttons file. Notice that I have a color here called dark gray. I didn't set that color in this file, so I need to set it somewhere else, and that's here in the init colors file. So this is just a file dedicated to color variables in Sass. Again, if any of you from the CSS unit kind of snuck along here because you're interested in what Sass is, this will look very foreign to you, but to those of you who have seen Sass and used it before, this is the colors variable folder, and it's in the init. There's a couple other, sort of initializing values that are being done here. There's a lot of initialization. Things like setting site-wide fonts are done here and here. I set font sizes and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's the init folder for you, and the utilities folder is just for like little one-off classes that are useful for random stuff. So if I want to set a font, or I want to set a margin bottom, but I want to reset everything else to 0, I might do this. If I want to create an arrow, I might use this mix-in, like a little triangle arrow thing. So yeah, that's just the utilities folder, and I use Sass to pull this in. Note that if you're watching this and you want to use this kind of file structure in your own thing, it'll take a little bit of thinking, but you won't be able to use this syntax. This right here, this ****, that comes from a plugin actually called import glob loader. And this is a Webpack concept, but whenever you see stars like this, they're actually referring to globs, and that's this whole other thing. I won't even talk about it, but just Google globs. Like Sass glob or something, and maybe the tool that you want to use it with. So Sass glob gulp or node or Webpack. Yeah, so import glob loaders, and then you'll be able to use this, but you won't be able to use this off the bat because Sass doesn't support this. But yeah, that's it. Very exhaustive video, very long video, but I hope it's a good oversight into my own process. And more accurately my company's process and the style guidelines that they have set out for internal code and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully that was informative. This is the end to the end. Now it's been an hour and a half, and I hope it was informative. Let me know, give me feedback as always, and let me know what you want to see in the next video in the chat. Thank you very much. Much respect to anyone who's held in to this entire video. I need to go clean my room and do a bunch of other things now. Cheers, and I'll see you later.